Hey everyone, Alex here from WornOffKeys.com, and in this Discord.js tutorial, we're going to be covering slash commands, which is a new feature that Discord has recently implemented. Here I'm inside of a new server, and Discord has always had these things where you could do // and there's a number of different commands such as a table flip, which would then send this in the chat. However, as I'm sure you know, most bots have some type of prefix where you would send a message such as !ping or !ping or something like that. But Discord has recently added it so we can add in our own custom commands inside of this right here. So within this video, I'm going to show you how you can create your own custom commands, how you can delete your own custom commands, how you can list all of your custom commands, as well as how to use the WornOffKeys commands npm package to make this very simple. And if you want to skip to a certain section in the video, go ahead and use the YouTube chapters at the bottom of the video player, and you can skip ahead to a certain section that you're interested in. And real quick, before we continue, if you do need help with anything throughout this video, feel free to join the WornOffKeys Discord server and ask your questions within the Discord.js and Discord.js 2 channels, and I'm sure someone will be able to help you out. So one thing to move forward with is that your bot will have to be invited to your servers with the applications.command scope and not just the bot scope. So just ensure both of these are checked, and then here's your new invite URL. I've now invited my tutorial bot, and we're going to go ahead and set up a new project. If you already have a project established, then you can go ahead and skip to the next section using the YouTube player. So here I'm within VS Code. I have an empty project, and I'm going to start off by making a new node project by using npm init-y. I'm then going to create a couple new files. The first one will be index.js as well as .env. Now back into the console, I'm going to install some dependencies that we need using npm install discord.js as well as .env. We'll install WornOffKeys commands later on in the video. For now, we're just going to use the basic discord.js, and we're going to add in the token into our .env file. So if your token was abc123, then you would add it into this file like this. Of course, I'll paste in my own token, and we also want to make sure that this .env file is inside of a gitignore. So if we create a new file called .gitignore, and within here we just simply say .env, this will now prevent the .env file from being pushed to GitHub repositories, which is important because we do not want our token to be exposed to the outside world. So with that said, we can now go inside of our index.js file and actually work on our bot. So I'm going to start off by just importing discord.js. We could say const discord.js equals require discord.js. We can also ensure that we have access to all of the things within our .env file by requiring .env, which is one thing that we installed, and we can call the config method for that. We can then create a new client, which is essentially an instance of your bot, by saying const client equals new discord.js.client. And now we can listen for whenever this client is ready by saying client.onReady. Whenever this event is fired, it will then invoke this callback function here. And within here, we can just simply say console.log, the bot is ready. And then now we can actually log into the bot by using client.login. And we can pass in the actual token using process.env.token. We can then save this, and I can try running this using node index.js. And now it says the bot is ready. And within Discord, we see it online. However, with node index.js, we'll have to restart the bot every time our source code changes. Instead, I'm going to run this by using nodemon. If you don't have access to nodemon, you can install it by simply doing npm install -g nodemon. And then to run it, you can just simply type in nodemon. Now, whenever our source code is changed, it will automatically restart the bot, which is a lot more convenient for us. So the first thing we're going to do is list all of the current slash commands registered to that specific guild. At the start, this will just be an empty array, but as we add more commands to it, we'll see some of them populated within that array. So we first need to make sure that this function is asynchronous, and then we can create a constant called commands and set it equal to await client.api.applications, and then we can pass in client.user.id. And now within here, we want to specify a guild ID. So I'm going to go back into Discord, and I'm going to right click on my guild and then copy the ID. If you don't see this, make sure to enable developer mode on your Discord account. I can go back and then make a new variable here. So const guild ID equals this. Now after our applications, we now want to specify a guild. There are global commands and there are guild-based commands. The guild-based commands are ideal for testing because they are registered instantly, where the global commands will be used for every single guild that your server is in, and those will take up to 1 hour to be visible. So when developing, it is highly encouraged to use guild-based commands. And to specify that we're looking to list all of the guild-based commands, we can now say .guilds and pass in the guild ID. Afterwards, we could say .commands.get. And so this is going to return all of the commands. We can then add in a console log of commands, and I can save this, and we are now going to get an empty array. However, as the bot restarts, once we add in our own commands to the guild, then we're going to see something within that array. But for now, we will keep this here. And underneath, we're going to create our very first command, which is going to be a very simple ping command, where if you type ping in chat, it should reply with pong. So in order to do this, we can say await client.api.applications. We can then pass in client.user.id. And at this stage, you might notice we have some repeat code. So let's go ahead and improve this. So I'll go ahead and create a new function. We can say const get app. This will be a function that will have one parameter, which will be the guild ID. This will be optional. And then within here, we can first get access to our app. So we can say const app equals client.api.applications. We can then pass in client.user.id. And then here we can say if guild ID actually is a thing, we can then specify by using app.guilds and pass in guild ID. Then after that, we can say return app. So going down here, we can replace all of this code with get app and passing in the guild ID. So if I save this, we still get our empty array. That's fine. However, moving forward, this will be a lot cleaner code rather than writing similar code every single time. So now we'll move forward with creating the actual ping pong command. To do this, we can say await get app and pass in the guild ID. We can then say .commands.post. And then here we can pass in an object. If you're familiar with APIs, you know that there are different types of endpoints that you can access using different types of methods. One is get, which is typically used to retrieve things. Another one is post, which is used to typically create things. And so here we're actually retrieving all of the commands, and here we are posting to the commands, which means that we are creating them. Now this object is going to contain some information. The first property will be data, and that will be its own object where we actually describe the command. Both a name and a description are required. So our name can be ping, and our description can be a simple ping pong command. Now I'm going to go ahead and save this, and our bot will restart, and we're currently listing all of the commands before we actually create this, so it's still an empty array in the console. However, if I save this one more time, we are now going to get this object here. We have an ID, that's our command ID. We have our application ID, the name, description, version, and guild ID. And if we go inside of our actual guild, and if we do /, we'll now see some other commands that I use for testing, as well as our ping command. And if I try this, nothing currently will happen, and it'll actually look like an error in here, but only we see this, and no one else sees our actual command. So we can go ahead and dismiss this message, and then we can go back into our code. And now the goal is to listen for whenever the actual interaction occurs, and we can do this by using WebSockets. However, Discord.js clients give us a very simple way to do this. We can say client.ws, which stands for WebSocket, .on. We can then pass in a string, which will be interaction_create. We can then pass in an asynchronous function callback, which will have an interaction as a parameter. And within here is where we can handle each individual command's interaction. The first thing we can gain access to is the actual command as a string. So I can say const command equals interaction.data.name.to lowercase. Now within here, I'm going to simply console log the command so we can have a full understanding of when this occurs. I can save this, our bot restarts. I could then run !ping, and we now see ping in the console. However, our interaction still fails because we have to actually respond with something. So I'm going to dismiss this, and going back, we can now use a switch statement or a chain of if statements to actually listen for each individual command and then handle those accordingly. So we could say if command is exactly equal to ping. Again, this is lowercase because we are using two lowercase right here. So within here, we can then respond with the actual Pong reply. And to do this, it isn't as simple as just saying message.reply that you might do typically. We have to say client.api.interactions and pass in interaction.id as well as the interaction.token. From here, we can access the callback, and then we can send a post request similar to whenever we were creating a command right here. This will actually send a post request back. And so this is actually our response and how to handle this specific interaction. Now, as I'm sure you can tell, this isn't very intuitive and not the easiest code to work with compared to the rest of Discord.js. That's because Discord.js doesn't natively handle this yet. They might do that in version 13 or future versions. And so this is what we have to currently do. However, as I previously mentioned, WOKCommands commands does a lot of this for you, and we'll look at that later on in the video. So for now, we're going to actually use a post request. We can have data, and within here, the type will be 4. We can also have our own data here where the content will be Pong, and this is the actual reply. So if I save this, and going back, if I type !ping, it will now say Pong in the chat here, and it'll also say that I used /ping within tutorial. So this is our first slash command actually working. If we do /, you will then see it right there. Now, if I were to run /test, nothing's actually going to happen because that's not registered as a real command. So that's one thing to keep in mind as well. Now, I'm sure you would imagine that when adding more and more commands, this will be very annoying to actually duplicate all this code. So we can go ahead and create a reply method, which will then automatically use this and reply with whatever the given string is. We can say const reply equals a function here. We can then pass in an interaction and then a response. Within here, I'm going to essentially cut this code here and paste it in here. We already have access to our interaction correctly. However, the Pong string right here can now be replaced with response. Now within here, we can simply say reply, pass in our interaction, and then the string Pong. Let's make sure that this works. I can save this. I could do /ping, and we're now going to see Pong. So that works. And moving forward, this will be a lot easier for us to actually reply with things. Now, one thing that you'll likely want to do is reply with an embed, and how you do that is going to be slightly different than just saying message.reply and passing in an embed. We can use something similar to this reply method, but we have one additional step as well. So I'm going to create a new method here, or a new / command, that is going to be creating an embed. I can say await get app, pass in the guild ID, .commands.post, and within this object, we're going to have a data object as well, with a name being embed and a description being displays and embed. And now every single option that's passed in, or every single argument, is going to be its own field. And with that said, here's another demonstration of how to use arguments, or what's known as options, within / commands. So we can pass in options, which is going to be an array. And within here, we can have an object with a name. For example, this could be name, as in the user's name. And then we can add in a description, which is required for every single option. This will be your name. We can also have required as a Boolean. In this case, I'll say true. And then we can have a type, which will be 3. And in the case of options, 3 represents a string. So now we can add in a couple more of these. We can say name will be age. The description will be your age. Required can be false for this one. Alternatively, you can just not have the required property here. Type will be 4, which is an integer. And now these options will be displayed within our actual interaction create callback. But how do we gain access to them? Well, we can destructure them. So we can say const options equals interaction.data. And of course, with this said, we can move this line above here, and we can also destructure the actual name. So here we can just say name.toLowercase. We also have access to options. And for now, I'm going to just simply console log options so we can actually see what's inside. We obviously don't have a handler for embed. That's fine. So it will act like it doesn't exist. However, we will still see our console log. If I save this, I go back and I do /embed. We now have a name, in this case, Alex. I can then press tab. And now at this stage, we're kind of typing as nothing. If we press tab again, we're now focused on the age parameter. So that's one thing that I'm not 100% sure on if this is intentional or not. It's kind of weird that you have to press tab twice to first exit the first parameter and then press it again to go into the next parameter. So here we're selected on age and I can enter 27. If I run this, this is not going to work, of course, as I mentioned. However, we do see this array here with a value and a name. We also have the types as well. Now, I find this format not the most user-friendly, so I'm going to actually change this and put it inside of its own args object. So we can say const args equals an object, and then we can say if options, because options will be undefined if we don't actually specify anything here. For example, with a ping command. So we want to ensure that options actually exist. We can then loop through the options. So for const option of options, and now we can destructure the name and the value. So const name and value equals option. We can then say args index of name equals value. And now after all of this, I'm going to console log args. I can now save this, and I can do /embed Alex and 27. If I run this, we now have this object here, which might be more user-friendly for you to use depending on your use case. Of course, you will have access to both of these at this stage, so it's up to you which one you prefer. I can dismiss this, and going back, we can now add in a handler. So I can say else if command is exactly equal to embed. And then here we can actually create our embed. So I can say const embed equals new message embed dot set title. We'll call this example embed. Of course, add in whatever title you want. And then here, I'm wanting to loop through all of the arguments and add in a field for each one. So I could say for const arg in args. This will give us access to each individual key. We can then say const value equals args index of arg. And then we can say embed.add field. The first argument is going to be the actual name of the field. So this will be arg. And then the second argument is going to be value. We now want to be able to actually send this embed. However, if we just do reply interaction embed, this won't actually work. So if I save this and I go back and I do /embed, we can say Alex and then 27. We now get an exception. Scrolling up, it's going to say invalid form body because we cannot just directly send an embed. Here it's going to say data.content could not interpret this actual JSON string here. And so we need to actually create our own API message to send this correctly. And if you've had to work with a direct API in ways like this before, you may have had to do this before. So the common way to do this is const create API message. This is going to be an asynchronous function that has two parameters. The first one will be an interaction. The second one will be the actual content. In this case, it'll be embed. Now within here, we're going to say const, and we're going to destructure some pieces of information. That'll be from await, which is why this function is asynchronous. We can now say API message dot create. And within here, we have to pass in an actual channel. And we can do that by getting access to the channel ID from the interaction. So we can say client dot channels dot resolve. We can then pass in interaction dot channel underscore ID. The second argument will be the actual content, which in this case is just our parameter. And then we have to resolve the data and resolve the files. This will give us access to the actual embed as well as any other files that this method might use in the future. So we can say .resolve data and .resolve files. Now we have access to data and files, which is what we want to actually destructure. So we have data and files, and now we're wanting to return an object. And this object is going to contain the actual properties of the data object itself. So we can spread that object into here. And then we can also just have our own files property, which will contain the files object. So now what we can do is within our reply, we can actually change the response to be an API message from the create API message method that is then going to actually return the embed. So one thing we want to change is how this data object is structured. We can say let data equals an object where content equals response, which is the exact same thing right here. So I can now remove this because this will then reference itself. And so this is basically the same exact code. However, if type of response is exactly equal to object, which means that this is an embed, I can add in a comment here, check for embeds. We can then say data equals await, which means that this function needs to be asynchronous. So await, create API message. We can then pass in the interaction and the response, which is the embed. So this will actually return this object here, which will then contain all the necessary information for us to respond using this code right here. So if it's a normal string, everything will act the same way. However, if it's an embed, we're then going to change the data to be the correct response. So I can save this, the bot will restart. I can then do /ping to make sure that this still works. And it does. I can then do /embed. The name will be Alex. The age will be 27. And we actually get an example embed with the name being Alex and the age being 27. So now the reply method is the only thing we need to do in order to respond with an embed or a string, which is very convenient for us moving forward. So we've talked about how to list the commands, how to create the commands, but let's say we want to actually delete the embed command. So I'm going to comment out this section of code here. And when I save this, we're still going to have it created here. Here we have the command ID as well as the guild ID, which we also have defined in our code, of course, right up here. So we have get and post. And if you're familiar with APIs, we also have a delete method. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the embed command. I can do this with await get app, passing in the guild ID, .commands, and then here I can pass in the actual command ID. So I can copy this, and then I can say .delete. So I will save this, our bot will restart. We still see it here because this is going to console log this before we actually delete it. However, if I comment this out, save it, we are now only going to see one command. And if I go back to the Discord server and do /embed, we don't actually see it here. Now, if you're using global commands, which basically means that the guild ID in this exact code doesn't exist, then it might take up to an hour to see this change. But if you're using guild-based commands like we are here, not only will the change only be visible within this specific guild, but it also is instant, which, like I previously mentioned, is ideal for development. Now I'm going to go over how the WOKCommands commands package makes this a lot simpler, where you don't have to go through and check every single command individually, and how if you're already using the WOKCommands package, it does a lot of the heavy lifting for you, so you can simply change a few properties and it will automatically create /commands from your existing commands. So I'm going to go ahead and comment out most of this code. Our get app all the way down to our login will be commented out. So right here, we're just logging in, and above, we're doing our standard imports and creating our client and defining our guild ID. From here, we can go into the console and we can install WOKCommands commands using npm install WOKCommands. Go ahead and run that. We can then use nodemon to run our bot again. And now within here, we're looking to import WOKCommands commands. So const WOKCommands equals require WOKCommands commands. We can then listen for whenever the bot is ready with client.onReady. And within this callback, we can now create a new instance of WOKCommands commands. New WOKCommands, we can pass in the client, and then an object here, which is going to specify the different directories and other options that we have. For example, we can say commands dir, and this will just be commands, which is a folder that we then have to create, as we did right here. We also want to pass in an array of strings for the different test server IDs. This is very important because when WOKCommands commands notices that you want a /command and you don't specify a test server, it will create a global command, which as previously mentioned, might take up to an hour to be displayed. So we can say test servers as an array, and we can just simply pass in the guild ID. So whenever we specify a command as a test only command, it will then look to this array to know which guilds to actually register that command in. So we can go ahead and save this, and we get a couple warnings, which we can simply ignore by just saying show warns is false. Some of these should not be here, and depending on when you're watching this video, those may or may not be there. So show warns is false, and now we have less warnings, so that's good to go. So now we're going to create the simple ping pong command. I can then say ping.js as a new file name, and we can say module.exports is an object. We can specify slash is true. We can specify test only is true. And this will make it so this command will only be registered in guilds that are specified within the test servers array. So going back into our file, we can now add in a description, which is required for all slash commands. This will be a simple ping pong command. Now, if we go back into the Discord and I do /ping, we see the same exact description. So to make sure that this is going to be different, we can add in an exclamation point. So at the end, we can just add in a couple exclamation points, so it's very clearly different. We can then add in a callback, and if you're used to WOKCommands commands, the actual properties within this object are slightly different. The message and prefix will not exist, and there is a new channel property which you will then have access to as well for normal commands and slash commands. However, we don't need access to any of those here, so we'll just basically have an object there. And a difference within slash commands is that we have to now return the actual information. So whether that be a string or an embed, we now have to return that. So we can now say return pong. And I'm also going to add in a couple exclamation points, so this is obviously different from the previous pong command. I can then save this. We now see WOKCommands commands loaded one command, and going back into Discord, I can do /ping and select the one with a bunch of exclamation points, and it now says pong. So WOKCommands commands does a lot of heavy lifting for you, and you just have to specify a few certain things here, and also a slightly different system when it comes to the actual content. But what happens if you're wanting to transition into slash commands, but not just have a complete switch all at once? Well, you can actually specify the string both in all lowercase here, and this will register as a slash command and a normal command. So within our callback, let's say we have access to a message, and again, message will be undefined if this is ran as a slash command. So we can say if message to ensure it actually exists. We can then say message.reply pong. I can then save this, and going back into the Discord server, I can run /ping, and it says pong, and now I can run exclamation point ping, and it also replies as pong. So this is now used as both a slash command and a normal command. Now what happens if I want to reply with an embed? Well, it's simple. You just create the embed and then return it. So for example, I can say const embed equals new message embed dot set title example dot set description pong, and then here we can reply with the embed, and then also we can return the embed. So I can save this. I can go into Discord /ping is now going to respond with the actual embed, and we don't have to go through and create the API message or anything like that. WOKCommands commands will do that for us. Then also exclamation point ping will now reply with the same exact embed. So the last thing I wanted to show you is how arguments are used. So let's say hypothetically, we're wanting to pass in the name and age of the user into this ping command. Doesn't make too much sense, but it's just a basic example. So we can say minimum arguments is 2, and expected args will now be a string, where the first one is name, the second one is age. Keep in mind that the minimum number of arguments will tell WOKCommands commands how many of these arguments you want to be required. If I were to then add in a country, this would then be an optional argument because the minimum args is 2, which would encompass these two right here. And so I may want to specify the actual square brackets here instead of the arrow brackets in order to specify this command here. Now, this syntax isn't exactly required. You could use the less than and greater than sign. However, having it like this makes it more clear that what is optional. So we have access to args, which is just like the normal commands, it's an array. We also have access to text if we want that, which is all of them joined together. But for now, we just need access to args. And we're going to go ahead and add in the name and the age and the country to this embed. So I can now destructure these. So const name, age, country equals args. And then I can say embed.add field. Name is name. I can then copy this a couple times. I can then add in the age. And then I can add in the country, which would then be country or none, because again, this is optional. And so this is a fallback string. So now I can save this. Going back into Discord /ping. When I hover over the one with exclamation points, we now see the different arguments. Clicking on this, we're wanting our name, which is Alex, our age 27. And then if I press tab again, here we have the country, which is the USA. If I run this, now we see the actual things within the embed. We also see Pong here, which was the description previously. And so this is how you're going to handle the arguments. It's very similar to how you previously would. It's going to interpret all of these as 3 different arguments, and then also understand which ones are required based off the minimum number of arguments. So the goal I had for this system was to make it so you had to change as little things as possible in order to implement slash commands into your bot. Now, a final note is that this system was just published to WOKCommands, and there could be changes in the future. Obviously, I can't update this video once it's actually live, but I can update the pinned comment. So please check the pinned comment for any updates, possibly a new video, or any mention of breaking changes to the system. Thanks for watching this Discord.js tutorial. If you want to learn more about Discord.js, consider clicking on the playlist you see on your screen now. If you need help, feel free to leave a comment or ask in the WOKCommands Discord, which can be found in the video description.